Have you ever felt like a silent observer? Someone who can see beyond social masks with just a fleeting glance? There are moments when your intuition resonates powerfully before a stranger, whispering of their hidden sorrows or unspoken intentions. You yearn for stillness with an almost burning intensity, feeling deeply recharged in solitude, while the world outside views loneliness as something to be feared. Carl Jung didn't call this eccentricity or detachment. He saw it as a sign of a profound individuation process, where a woman has begun to connect with the deepest layers of her unconscious. It's the imprint of spiritual power, not mystical magic, but a form of emotional wisdom forged in the fires of contemplation and the courage to face oneself. Yet, the price of this clear-sightedness is often misunderstanding. Your quiet, weighty presence can inadvertently trigger insecurity in turbulent souls, leading them to react negatively or label you unapproachable, peculiar. Most dangerously, you might begin to doubt your own intuition, tempted to reject this gift to blend into the crowd and simply be normal. In this video, we will unravel 5 invisible yet incredibly potent signs that, through Carl Jung's lens, reveal a rare inner spiritual strength within you, and pay special attention to sign number 5, for it holds the answer to your life's greatest wounds, explaining why they were not punishments, but essential stepping stones on your path to becoming a true healer. Sign 1. The intuition that sees through every mask. Have you ever met a woman who, with just one look, made you feel you couldn't lie? The kind of gaze that gives you the sense your entire inner world has just been placed under an invisible scanner. You haven't said anything. You haven't even had time to prepare a pretty answer, yet she already knows you're hiding something. People often joke half-seriously that she can read other people's aura, but the psychological truth beneath it is far more fascinating. What she possesses is not magic, but intuition, a form of emotional vision that Carl Jung saw as the bridge between the conscious mind and the unconscious. And the astonishing thing is, you may possess it too, or at least you may have felt it at some moment you couldn't fully explain. Try recalling a very ordinary situation. A friend says, "I'm fine," yet somehow, you know instantly they aren't. Not because they cry, not because they sigh, but because something in their tone skips slightly off rhythm, or their eyes avoid yours for just 1 second. Or at work, during a meeting, your boss says, "This project is going well," while everyone nods happily. But something in you whispers, something is off. You have no evidence, you don't analyze anything, yet intuition lights up. There is something beneath the surface. That is precisely the realm of intuition, something that doesn't require logic, yet feels surprisingly accurate. Carl Jung called intuition the cognitive function that allows us to perceive the possibilities inherent in all things, and he once wrote, "The intuitive mind is a sacred gift, and the rational mind is a faithful servant." When you meet a woman with strong intuition, what impresses you most is not how she observes, but how she feels the world. What others consider tiny details, faint, meaningless, are the unconscious language she naturally reads, like an intricate antenna constantly tuning into hidden emotional frequencies beneath every spoken word. Let me paint a simple scene for you. She can detect a lie not because someone stutters or blushes, but because a micro-expression flashes across their face, a shift so subtle it's almost invisible. Or when someone tries to appear strong, she sees the fear, the slight tremble of a hand, the uneven breath, the shoulder that drops half an inch. Even in normal conversations, she hears what isn't being said, the sudden pause between sentences, or the way someone's eyes dart to the right when they mention something they don't want to face. If you've watched shows like Big Little Lies, you'll recognize this type of intuitive character. Someone who can walk into a room and immediately sense who is keeping a secret, who is hurting, who is pretending to be calm while their mind is screaming. But here is the interesting part. She doesn't force it. She doesn't analyze like Sherlock Holmes. She doesn't map relationships on a whiteboard. She simply knows. And that knowing arrives as naturally as breathing. How do others react to a woman like this? This is where things get delicate. Some people are drawn to her, because it is rare in life to meet someone who truly sees you. They feel her sincerity, her understanding, the sense of safety she offers without needing many words, but others withdraw instantly. You know these types, they feel exposed, unmasked. seen through beyond the facade they've spent years perfecting to hide their insecurities. Her presence acts like a mirror, and those who aren't ready to face themselves will instinctively step back. And here is the most Jungian truth. Intuition is not vague hunches or mystical clairvoyance. It is the unconscious speaking to us. It works by connecting all the emotional data you have ever collected: facial cues, tone, tension, pauses between words, old emotional memories, painful experiences, even familiar images or scents, and synthesizing them into a clear perception before your rational mind has time to think. In other words, intuition is the psychological equivalent of light-speed processing. To make it even clearer, imagine the brain has two control rooms: one brightly lit, where logic analyzes every detail and calculates every move; the other, dimmer, quieter, where the unconscious stores emotions, memories, and human behavior patterns. A woman with strong intuition is someone whose door between these two rooms is always open. She moves effortlessly between psychological light and shadow. While most people rely only on the bright room analysis, reasoning, logic, she uses both. And because of that, she sees far more than others can think. Another fascinating thing: intuitive women instantly recognize who is genuine and who is playing a role. It doesn't matter what someone says. She senses the mismatch between spoken words and true emotion. Have you ever met someone who smiles brightly but leaves a chill down your spine? Or someone who seems fine but you feel an unseen heaviness beneath their voice? That is the unconscious detection she reads. Her intuition does not care about surface performance. It cares about truth. If we turn to pop culture again, think of Wanda in WandaVision. She doesn't need to ask who is grieving or who is pretending to be strong. She feels the energy immediately. But unlike a superhero, an intuitive woman in real life doesn't use her power to control or expose anyone. She doesn't unmask people. Her intuition simply allows her to see the inside without demanding confession. She sees to understand. She sees to empathize. She sees to heal, not to shame. And that is one reason people easily misunderstand her. They assume she is judging them. They think she is analyzing every word, every gesture. But she isn't. Her intuition functions like a second pair of spiritual ears. It hears what others don't hear, sees what others overlook. She uses it so gently that even she sometimes forgets she perceives the world more deeply than most. According to Jung, intuition is the function that allows us to see, rather than merely think. For him, intuition was not the vagueness of emotion, but the sharpness of the unconscious. And when someone has a natural bridge between the ego and the unconscious, she reads reality with multiple layers of information simultaneously. That is why she detects insincerity in a fraction of a second, why she senses someone's sadness before they shed a tear, why she knows when someone hides their pain behind strong words. But intuitive power is not just the ability to read others, it is the ability to see oneself. And because she is familiar with her own emotional landscape, she easily recognizes the subtle misalignments in others. She knows what is real, what is fake, what is defense, what is buried hurt. In everyday psychological language, she catches the vibe instantly and with striking accuracy. Now, does intuition make her life harder? Absolutely. When you see more, you also feel more. When you notice dishonesty, you can't pretend you don't. When you sense someone's pain, you can't simply ignore it. And when you perceive the parts others try to hide, you often become the person they unconsciously seek not to confess to, but to be understood by. But here is the most important thing I want you to remember. If you feel you sense things, know before knowing, or see beneath people's masks, you are not strange, not overly sensitive, not paranoid. You are using a psychological function Jung believed only certain individuals fully activate: intuition connected to the unconscious. It is not a burden, but a form of sight. It keeps truth close to you, even when others try to bury it. And that ability to see is the first step toward healing yourself and those you love. Intuition, when forged through experience, becomes light, not a blinding light, not a harsh one, not one that destroys. It is a soft illumination that reaches corners others avoid. It helps people see themselves more clearly. It helps you live more truthfully. And as Jung once said, the meeting of two intuitive souls creates a chemical reaction. When truth arises, both are transformed. And if you carry this within you, You possess one of the rarest invisible signs. You see what others do not. You read the unspoken language of the soul, and you never mistake anything for the truth. Sign 2. Choosing silence and solitude as companions. Have you ever wondered why there are moments when you just want to escape every sound, step away from every conversation, and find a quiet corner simply to breathe, not to think about anything complicated, but just to return to yourself for a moment? Many might say that feeling is a sign of exhaustion, introversion, or even being distant. But if you pay closer attention, there are women who don't just need silence, they choose silence. They move toward it, as if it is the most natural place for them to be their truest selves. And the interesting part is, they don't feel lonely at all. They find wholeness in moments alone, in ways most people will never truly understand. Try recalling a day when you visited your usual cafe. Around you were the sounds of clinking spoons, scattered conversations, phones buzzing endlessly. And then, somewhere in the corner, you noticed a woman sitting alone. Not rushing, not hiding, not searching for something to press, scroll, or use as a distraction. Perhaps she was simply gazing out the window, or gently swirling a cup of tea in her hand. Yet something was unmistakably clear. She was comfortable there, comfortable with herself. You might not know why, but the sight of her gives you a strange sense of peace. And you find yourself wondering, how can she sit alone and still look so complete? That is where the second sign emerges. The ability to befriend silence and solitude. Carl Jung once said something that made many pause and rethink their lives. Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes. When a woman steps into silence, she is not closing the door to the world, she is opening the door to herself. Instead of seeking validation from outside, she listens to the truest voice of her inner being. This is not the type of solitude that makes people feel empty. It is the kind that helps them find the home of their soul. This makes her different in our time. You've seen it yourself. Most people fear silence the way they fear a dark room. They turn on the music the moment they walk into their house, turn on the TV just to have noise, scroll their phones whenever there is a spare second. They cannot stand facing themselves because they fear the thoughts they have buried for too long will surface. But a woman with high spiritual strength is different. She doesn't need to run from silence. She enters it the way someone steps into a familiar home. In silence, she is not facing a void, she is facing herself, and that does not frighten her. One of the most beautiful expressions of this sign is how she restores her energy. While many people need external activity, going out, socializing, seeking laughter, she is recharged by moments spent alone. A book, a cup of tea, a quiet afternoon with sunlight slipping through the window. A journal where she pours her heart out. These things are not escapes, they are returns, and she returns with a warmth that feels like she has finally touched a part of her soul that the noise of the day kept pulling her away from. Does any of this feel familiar to you? Have you ever felt peace when you closed your bedroom door, sat on your bed for a few minutes, and simply listened to your own breath? And have you ever felt guilty for doing so, as if you were rejecting the world? The truth is, you weren't rejecting anyone. You were agreeing with yourself, acknowledging that there is a universe within you, waiting to be heard. Jung believed solitude is the most sacred space of the psyche, not the social withdrawal kind, but the shedding of noise to touch the core of one's being. He saw it as a laboratory of the soul, a place where one observes their own truth without distortion from others' expectations. For the woman with spiritual depth, solitude is the gateway to individuation, the journey of becoming the person she was born to be, not the version others want, not the role society assigns, but the raw, honest essence of who she truly is. But silence is not always welcomed by the world. People who rely on noise to feel alive will not understand her. They may think she is cold, distant, or even arrogant. They will ask, why is she always alone? They do not know that such questions reflect their own fear of being left with themselves, fear of facing their real feelings. She is not cold, she is listening. She is not avoiding, she is choosing what aligns with her soul. Here's a small story. One day, in a group of friends, someone said, "She's so quiet, she probably doesn't like us." But when you spoke with her privately, you realized she wasn't distant at all. She simply didn't want to waste words. She speaks only when something truly matters. She doesn't create connections recklessly, but every connection she forms carries weight. That is the power of someone who feels whole in silence. She does not need noise to prove she exists. If you look at popular culture, you'll notice this archetype everywhere. Rei Ayanami from Neon Genesis Evangelion, Diana from Wonder Woman, or Elsa from Frozen. These women share a common trait. They walk into solitude, not because they were cast out, but because they found their true identity there. And you can sense that their greatest strength is not in battle, but in the moments they stand alone, yet unshaken. One of the most delicate parts of this sign is her ability to self-heal. When she sits alone, she does not run from her emotions. She allows them to rise, observing them the way one watches clouds drifting across the sky. If old wounds resurface, she does not panic. She listens. She writes. She breathes through them. And through that, she turns solitude into a space of rebirth. No one needs to comfort her. No one needs to explain anything. She becomes a sanctuary for herself. You will notice she carries a rare kind of calm, not the forced calm that comes from suppressing emotion, but a calm earned from sitting many times with her sadness, her fears, the deep thoughts within her. When others face heartbreak and panic because they don't know what to do, she knows exactly what to do. Sit down, breathe, and feel. She does not try to push emotions away. She lets them return to where they need to go. That is not passivity, that is maturity. And the beautiful part is that her solitude does not make her closed off. On the contrary, it makes her someone others feel safe with. Because a person who is comfortable sitting beside their own emotions will not fear sitting beside someone else's. She does not flinch when someone cries. She does not freeze when someone feels lost. She does not retreat when someone opens up, because she has done all of that with herself. And such a person always carries a quiet tenderness. But here is the important truth. The solitude she chooses is not an escape from life, but a return to the essence of her spirit. When she enters silence, she begins to hear what truly matters. Her values, her fears, her dreams, her truth. Those voices can never be heard in crowds. They appear only when someone is brave enough to pause. And this woman has that courage. Do you recognize yourself in this? Perhaps you've thought you were different, hard to fit in, too introverted. But if you feel lighter when you're alone, if peace rises in you when no one is demanding anything, if your energy returns when the world steps back from you, then this is not a flaw. It is the call of inner maturity, the beginning of the journey back to your true self, the sign that your soul is asking to be heard. Solitude is not an enemy. It is a teacher, a mirror reflecting the layers you often avoid, a doorway into the unconscious, where you find answers no one else can give. And as Jung reminded us, in each of us, there is another whom we do not know. When you sit bravely in silence, you meet that person, the deepest, truest, and long-forgotten part of yourself. And once the two of you meet, you are never the same again. Sign 3. The courage to face the darkness. In life, sooner or later you will meet women who have walked through experiences so devastating that merely hearing about them makes others feel like collapsing, and yet they still stand tall, still remain calm, still look life straight in the eyes, without trembling. Not because they do not know fear, not because they do not feel pain, but because they have stepped into the deepest shadows of their own soul and survived. A woman who has walked through darkness often carries a very different gaze, both gentle and piercing, as if she understands something about the world that most of us are still trying to avoid. Try remembering a woman you once met, or perhaps it is you, someone who, every time she faces a harsh challenge, somehow remains steady. No dramatics, no complaints, no exaggeration to gain sympathy. She simply stays, facing it, enduring it. Like when others drown in shame, she does not look away. When someone is furious to the point of destroying everything around them, she is the only one who stays calm. When someone sinks into despair, she doesn't say, "Don't be sad." She simply sits beside them, as if she knows exactly what that emotion looks like from the inside. A small story for you. Once, at your workplace, a colleague suddenly burst into tears after receiving terrible news from home. Everyone panicked. Some froze, others didn't know what to say. But then you saw a woman walk over, gently place her hand on that person's shoulder, and say nothing else. Her calm presence slowed the entire room. Not because she was stronger, but because she had once stood in the exact place of despair. Her body remembered the darkness, so when she saw it again, she did not run. This is the essence of the third sign. The courage to face the darkness. Not the glamorous courage painted by superhero movies, but a quiet form of bravery. The courage to sit alone and confront fear, anger, shame, childhood wounds, chaotic memories we usually bury deep inside. She does not pretend she has no shadow. She knows it's there, and instead of running from it, she opens the door to speak with it. Carl Jung once said something that perfectly captures this journey. 1. Does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. This is one of his core teachings about the shadow, the unconscious part of us that holds everything we do not want to admit about ourselves. And the woman with high spiritual strength is the one who walks into the darkness not to punish herself, but to relearn the language of the soul. That courage creates a power that those who flee from darkness will never touch. You may wonder, what allows her to do that? What allows someone to sit down and look directly at the worst parts of themselves? The answer lies in inner maturity. Someone who has never truly fallen apart usually fears the darkness because they're afraid that if they enter it, they will never find their way out. But someone who has collapsed and risen again many times knows something crucial. Darkness is not the end, but the place of rebirth. Darkness did not destroy her. It shaped her. Think about the times you've been hurt so deeply you had no idea who to talk to. Everything inside you felt chaotic. Fear of the future, self-blame, the feeling of being abandoned. You looked in the mirror and didn't recognize yourself anymore. That is darkness. And if you were brave enough not to distract yourself with work, noise, or temporary relationships, but instead truly stopped to feel it, then you have stepped onto her path. But what makes this woman extraordinary is not simply that she has experienced darkness, but that she is not afraid of experiencing it again. She knows that pain carries lessons, and chaos carries messages. That is why, when others face hardship, she does not overreact. She does not panic. She is not frightened by their negative emotions. She has met those emotions in their most intense forms inside herself. And someone who has survived their own inner storms will never be shaken by another's pain. Another everyday example. Have you ever witnessed a heated argument at home or at work? Voices rising, bitter words flying, logic drowned by emotion. In those moments, most people retreat or explode. But you'll notice one woman standing in the storm without wavering. She doesn't panic. She doesn't avoid. She doesn't fight back with anger. She listens. She stabilizes the room. She anchors the energy, as if she has a center inside her that storms cannot touch. To do this, she must have faced her own inner storms many times before. This courage is not numbness. On the contrary, it comes from deep sensitivity, but a sensitivity strengthened through experience. This woman understands that darkness is not something to erase, but something to recognize and integrate into the whole of who she is. She does not pretend to be pure or flawless. She knows her own dark parts, weak parts, chaotic parts, and because she knows them, they no longer control her. If you look at characters like Maleficent, Raven from Teen Titans, or even Arya Stark from Game of Thrones, you'll notice they share one trait. They descended into darkness, but darkness did not swallow them. It only made them sharper, more awake, more human. This does not make them cold. It makes them capable of understanding the suffering of others better than anyone. This is the essence of a spiritually strong woman in Jung's psychology. She does not reject the darkness. She turns it into strength. One remarkable aspect of this third sign is that she cannot be easily manipulated by fear. The simplest way to control someone is to exploit what they avoid. Loneliness, hurt, failure, fear of being abandoned. But because she has faced all of them, she no longer fears them. And a person unafraid of darkness cannot be controlled. Others look at her and think she is unshakable, hard to influence, strangely resilient. But that inner strength does not come from empty affirmations or toxic positivity. It comes from the fact that she has sat with her real pain. No hiding, no running, no pretending, just facing it. And then you will notice something interesting. Her ability to face darkness makes her someone others feel safe with. During a crisis, people rarely seek those who offer pretty words. They seek those who have walked through darkness. They trust that such a person will not judge, will not minimize, will not try to fix them with shallow phrases. A woman fluent in the language of darkness always knows how to sit with another's pain with the greatest sincerity and dignity. Have you ever felt that you've endured too much in life? That you're no longer as naive as before? That you look at life with deeper, steadier eyes? If you have ever felt that way, it is not a sign of hardness. It is a sign of inner maturity. You are not being punished. You are being forged. And every time you face darkness, failure, loss, hurt, or the frightening emotions inside you, you are expanding the capacity of your soul. The beautiful part of this journey is that, the more she walks into darkness, the more she finds true light. Not imagined light, but the light that comes from truly understanding oneself. That light does not sparkle or perform, but it is steady, deep, and so real that nothing can extinguish it. And this is the deepest meaning of the third sign. Real strength does not come from always appearing positive, but from daring to look where others are afraid to look. Real strength does not come from avoiding pain, but from entering it with awareness. Real strength does not come from the light you imagine, but from the darkness you dare to bring into consciousness. If you recognize yourself in this, if you have ever stepped into a dark place no one knew about, if you have faced nameless fears, if you have felt yourself grow stronger after every crisis, then remember, this is not an accident. It is a sign that you are becoming your most whole self, because only those who dare to enter the darkness can carry a true flame back out. Sign 4. Carrying the aura of silent presence. There are people who walk into a room without saying a word, without smiling brightly, without trying to appear friendly, and yet everything around them seems to shift. Not loudly, not showily, not with anything one could call a performance, and still the eyes of others instinctively turn toward them. It is not because of appearance, nor because of a particular action. It is presence, and for a woman with high spiritual strength, her presence carries a quiet radiance so deep that even the busiest souls must pause for a moment to feel it. I want you to picture this, not as a distant story, but as a moment you yourself may have experienced without knowing how to explain it, because most of us have encountered at least once a person whose very arrival changes the atmosphere without uttering a word. This brings us to a kind of energy Carl Jung once described when speaking of the monopersonality, a layer of self infused with the power of the unconscious. Not physical strength, but the strength of someone who has sunk to the bottom of her inner world and resurfaced with a more integrated self. Jung believed that people like this carry traces of the collective unconscious, as if they have accidentally touched an underground current that most of us never realize is flowing right beneath our feet. And it is this contact with the depths that generates a field of stillness around them, a stillness not defined by the absence of sound, but by the absence of chaos. I think you know what I mean, because perhaps you have seen such a woman before. When she walks in, the room does not grow louder, it settles. Conversations continue, but somewhere inside you, something begins to pay attention, as if your intuition is whispering, something is different here. And that difference does not lie in what the eyes can see, but in what makes the mind subtly recalibrate. Her silence is not an empty space. It is a space that allows others to see themselves. That is why some people feel drawn to her while others feel uneasy. Not because she does anything, but because she makes them sense what they have been avoiding. Let me say this before going further. That silent presence is not an accidental gift. It is the result of a journey. No one carries that kind of aura without having traveled through fearful, chaotic depths within themselves. If you see someone with a stillness so steady it feels sacred, understand that behind it lies more than experience. It is transformation. Jung once wrote, "In all chaos, there is a cosmos. In all disorder, a secret order." And this woman is the embodiment of that truth. She did not achieve stillness by avoiding chaos. She achieved it by surviving inside it long enough to hear the heartbeat of the hidden order beneath. But let me share a more subtle perspective. When she appears, those who rely on emotional masks often become uncomfortable. That stillness acts like an invisible mirror, reflecting back the turbulence they hide in their daily lives. People do not fear her, they fear the sensation of being seen. And interestingly, she does not need to stare or deliberately observe. Her presence alone makes them aware of their own imbalance. Some will walk away, some will stay, because they long for the peace they lost long ago. You can see this clearly in real life. Those who constantly chase noise cannot tolerate someone who carries silence. You might be wondering, so how is that stillness formed? The answer lies in nights no one witnessed. Nights when she had to sit with herself while her heart was breaking, when her trust collapsed, when she had to choose between running away and facing the truth, and she chose to face it. Facing created transformation. Transformation created stillness. Not the fragile kind, but the kind strong enough to support another confused soul. If you have ever met a woman who made you feel safe without knowing why, it is likely she has walked this kind of path. Her presence resembles the trace of a fire that has burned through many winters, long enough that the flame no longer flares violently, but glows steadily, softly, warmly. She does not seek attention. She does not try to be captivating, but it is her lack of seeking that creates true magnetism. Because in an age where everyone wants to be noticed, the one who does not need attention becomes rare. Let me give you a clearer example. Imagine a crowded meeting, full of people talking over one another, trying to prove themselves right, trying to showcase intelligence or authority, and then there is a woman sitting quietly, her eyes observing everything. No hurried movements, no unnecessary words, yet when she speaks, the whole room quiets. Not because she is loud, not because she demands to be heard, but because her energy tells others instinctively that what she is about to say matters. On an unconscious level, we can all feel who speaks from ego and who speaks from essence, and that distinction is never mistaken. This is what Jung meant when he described the mana personality, an inner strength that alters the energy field around them in ways logic cannot explain. But if you have ever seen a woman who carries this kind of stillness, you know it is not mystical. It is profoundly human. It is the residue of someone who has touched a place within herself that modern society often forgets. People fill every empty moment with noise, work, social media, amusements, but she has found the one place where noise becomes meaningless, within herself. And here is what gives her presence its weight. She no longer chases validation. She no longer needs to prove anything. Think about it. How many people today can live without depending on approval? How many can sit in silence without feeling empty? How many can stand alone in a crowded room without needing to blend in? Very few. And because it is rare, stillness becomes magnetic. But I want you to understand this. Stillness is not the destination. It is the result of a process. A process she paid for by losing things she once thought were essential: people, memories, beliefs, former versions of herself. And when everything fell away, what remained was her original self, neither loud nor pleading, but so strong it no longer needs to prove itself. When you have met yourself at your deepest level, silence no longer frightens you. You become the silence. And when you become silence, you are not only at peace within yourself, you make others want to be at peace beside you. That presence becomes like a steady breath in a room full of shallow ones, like an invisible anchor reminding others that they, too, have a place to return within themselves, even if they have forgotten it for years. That is why her stillness is so magnetic. It is not the silence of distance, but the silence of someone who has finally come home. Let me end this section with something you may have sensed all your life, but never named. The woman who carries the aura of stillness is not someone born extraordinary. She is someone who has endured more than you know. The serenity you see today is the echo of long conversations with herself, of inner conflicts, of collapses and risings, of losses that forced her to place a hand on her heart and say, "I will stay." Only those who have survived the deepest layers of their soul can carry a stillness that the world cannot ignore. And if you feel a part of yourself reflected in what I have just described, perhaps you should know this. What you are carrying is not oddness, nor an inexplicable difference. It is the sign of an inner strength growing quiet but powerful, gentle but undeniable. A sign that you are stepping closer to your true essence, where stillness is not something to seek, but something that naturally radiates. And sometimes, simply by showing up, you have already changed the world a little. Sign 5. Transforming hidden wounds into wisdom. I want to begin this section with something you have likely felt yourself, but never dared to say aloud. Some pains in life do not disappear. They simply change form. They do not stay on the skin. They sink into memory, into your patterns of reaction, into the way you see the world, even into the quiet rhythm of your own breathing. And strangely, it is precisely these pains that become the foundation for the most delicate form of wisdom a woman can possess. Not the kind of wisdom that comes from books, advice, or analysis, but the kind born from having once been shattered, from hitting the bottom and climbing back up, from being forced to have an honest dialogue with your own soul, in moments when it felt like no one in the world was on your side. You know, Carl Jung once wrote, "Where you stumble, there lies your treasure." And nothing could be truer for women who carry deep, hidden wounds, yet continue walking with an inexplicable calm. When speaking of women with high spiritual strength, we cannot avoid mentioning the archetype of the wounded healer, not because she seeks that role, not because she wants to be someone's refuge, but because her own journey forced her into depths most people are terrified to enter. Early wounds, devastating losses, betrayals no one could prepare for, silence swallowed whole, or a lifelong sense of never truly belonging anywhere. All of these gather into a storm that drives her inward. When there is nowhere left to run, she must turn inside. And in that moment, no matter how painful, a doorway opens to a kind of wisdom only those who have touched darkness can understand. I want you to imagine something simple. There are pains that still sting when someone mentions them, as if time has never been enough to soften them. Yet at the same time, that very pain is what makes others unconsciously come to you when they have no idea what to do with their own lives. You do not seek anyone out, but they come. You never claim to be wise, yet people listen to you, not because you have perfect answers, but because they sense the understanding in your eyes, an understanding impossible to possess unless you have walked through the same dark place where they are now stuck. Wounds create depth, depth creates wisdom, and wisdom creates a kind of magnetism that words do not need to justify. In women especially, this transformation becomes remarkably clear. When she sits across from someone in pain, she does not offer empty comfort. She does not rush to provide quick solutions. She does not push them to think positive. She is there in a completely different way, quiet but profound. The person sitting with her feels seen without exposing themselves, understood without having to explain, accepted without needing to become a more likable version of themselves. Her very presence creates an unconscious trust. She has been here. She knows how this place hurts. And that is why a woman who carries deep wounds often possesses a strangely transformative power. Do you recognize this in yourself? The way you understand others' emotions faster than they expect. The way you see someone's hidden sadness, even when they are smiling. The way you can sit beside someone and say nothing, yet they feel lighter. That is not random ability. It is wisdom born from all the storms you once carried alone. From the times you wanted to give up but somehow pulled yourself back up. From the moments you looked in the mirror and did not recognize yourself, yet kept living, kept hoping, even when you had no idea what that hope was built on. The beauty of the wounded healer archetype is this: pain is no longer an ending. It becomes a gateway. And once you walk through that gateway, you see the world differently. You no longer judge quickly. You no longer laugh at someone's mistakes. You no longer blame others for their fragile reactions. You understand that no one grows in a comfort zone, and no one becomes deep without losing something they once believed was forever. Interestingly, women who carry this sign often do not realize their own strength. They simply think they have been through a lot, so they understand a little better. But the people around them know. They sense her steadiness in moments when others panic. They recognize the sincerity in her voice when someone is hurting. They trust her intuition when facing difficult choices. That trust does not come from an impressive exterior, but from the depth they unconsciously perceive. Let me give you an everyday example to make this clearer. In a group of friends, when someone has just gone through heartbreak, everyone rushes to give advice: how to forget, how to move on, how to be strong. But there is one woman who simply sits beside them, not rushing, not lecturing, just placing a hand on their shoulder and saying softly, "I know this feeling is heavy." And strangely, that is the moment the heartbroken person finally breaks down in tears. Because she did not speak to fix the pain, she spoke from her own wound. That is wisdom, born from darkness. Jung believed that those who have walked through deep wounds possess the ability to touch another person's soul without needing words. Because wounds do not only leave emotion, they leave understanding. A kind of understanding that is not intellectual, but perceptive. Seeing what others hide, hearing what others do not say, sensing the fracture in someone's voice that everyone else overlooks. A woman with high spiritual strength becomes a kind of safe space, where others can simply be themselves, without defense, without performance, without pretending to be strong. because she once knew too well what pretending felt like. What I want you to remember is this: wounds do not make her weak, wounds make her real. And it is that reality that becomes her strength. But the journey of transforming wounds into wisdom is not easy. It begins with her touching the pain she spent years running from. Then, facing the feelings of abandonment, hurt, misunderstanding, and judgment. Then reaching the point where she must forgive the one who hurt her, or more cruelly, forgive herself. And finally, she learns the most important truth. A wound is not a sign of inadequacy. It is a sign that her soul once loved deeply, trusted deeply, lived deeply. A shallow heart cannot feel deep pain. When she accepts this, the pain begins to shift. It becomes subtle knowledge of human emotion. It becomes the ability to understand beyond language. It becomes a skill for recognizing truth in silence. It becomes a sensitivity that helps her move gently, but with immense compassion. The scars she once tried to hide now become a map, guiding others out of the dark corners they do not know how to face. And the most beautiful part is this: she does not need to declare any of it. Those who have been hurt will recognize her instantly. As if two wounded souls have a way of knowing each other without speaking. A single look, a single breath, a perfectly timed silence is enough for them to understand. Others feel she is a place where they can rest, a place where they do not have to be strong, a place where pain is not judged, but acknowledged. If this touches you, perhaps it is because you are carrying this sign yourself. You once thought your pain made you weak, but in truth, it is shaping you into a deeper, wiser, more trustworthy version of yourself. Not every pain deserves to be blessed, but any pain that has been transformed becomes the most beautiful part of your soul. And if you have ever wondered why people come to you when they are lost, why they open up to you faster than usual, why they tell you things they have never told anyone, the answer is here. They feel the wisdom born from your wounds, a wisdom no school can teach, a wisdom only those who have been broken can understand. A woman with high spiritual strength does not carry her wounds as burdens, but as reminders. She has lived, she has hurt, she has overcome, and now she walks with a peace that the world can only learn from, not grant her. Her wound was once where she fell. Now it is where she stands. And it is also where others find their light. Though each sign carries a different form of quietness, they all meet at one point. A woman with spiritual strength is not created by luck, but by the deepest dialogues she has had with herself. And when you recognize these signs within your own soul, it is not a warning, it is a signal that you are entering a new stage of maturity. But this journey does not end with recognizing inner strength. After these 5 distillations, another door opens. The door of identity rebirth, of learning to protect your energy, and of rediscovering meaning, to live the rest of your life with intention. And right there, 3 expanded values are waiting for you to step into. If you are ready to open that door, comment, "I'm ready," so we can continue together. When life gives you a chance to be reborn a second time, there are moments in life when you look at yourself and realize something strange. The person living in the mirror today is no longer the one who used to smile in old photographs. It is not simply that you have grown up, but more like you have survived a storm so great that every old layer has fallen away, leaving behind a completely different self. And sometimes, you ask yourself, could this be the second chance at rebirth that life is offering you? The opportunity Jung referred to when he wrote, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are." I want you to think about your own journey for a moment, without confusion, without judgment, just a quiet instant of looking into the ruins you once walked through, the losses, the betrayals, the chaotic seasons you thought you would never rise from. When a person moves through enough darkness, they enter a very strange territory. The territory of the second rebirth. Not rebirth in a mystical sense, but an awakening of a new identity, a version of yourself you never knew you could become. What's fascinating is that the second rebirth never arrives during easy times. It shows up when all your old answers stop working, when the social roles you once clung to no longer fit, and when even your own inner voice feels unfamiliar. In Jung's psychology, this is the moment when the old ego, the self built from expectations, fear, and defenses, begins to crack open, to make space for a deeper form of maturity. Jung called this the journey back to the self, a journey he described with the words, "There is no coming to consciousness without pain." If you feel like you are in that phase, you are not alone. Many people who have gone through divorce, career crises, the loss of loved ones, or simply the hollow exhaustion of living too long according to others' expectations, eventually reach this stage. They no longer want to return to who they once were, but they also do not yet know who they will become. And it is precisely that in-between moment where the second rebirth begins. But what does a second rebirth actually look like in real life? It is not an explosion, not a day when you wake up and everything is different. It looks more like this. Little by little, you realize the old values can no longer hold you. The habits that once made you feel safe now feel restrictive. The relationships you used to hold on to suddenly feel heavy. The goals you chased for half your life turn out to be milestones someone else set for you. During this process, what you feel most clearly is not outward change but an inward calling. A calling that tells you you must live more truthfully, listen to yourself more attentively, and courageously step out of the patterns that once confined you. And you begin to understand why Jung wrote, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakes." The second rebirth does not begin when you change your outer life, but when you redirect your gaze from the outside inward. When you stop asking, "What must I do to make things better?" and start asking, "Who am I?" when there is nothing left to prove. Most people who go through the second rebirth describe a surprising moment. One day, they look back at their old wounds and realize those wounds no longer control them, not because they forgot but because they understood. And when understanding appears, pain loses its power. At that moment, they step into a new chapter, one in which the past is no longer a chain, but fuel for a more purposeful life. If you have ever felt this, it means you have already begun to die to your old self. That death is not frightening, it frees you from invisible constraints. It allows you to enter what Jung called individuation, the process of becoming yourself, not a replica of someone else, not a product of societal expectations. And within this rebirth comes a paradoxically beautiful truth. When you stop trying to prove anything, you become the strongest version of yourself. Those who have fallen deeply often see the world more gently. Those who have been wounded become kinder not because they are fragile, but because they understand how pain works. And those who have lost everything often learn that life is vast, long, and filled with countless things waiting to be rebuilt with their own hands. The second rebirth is not about starting over. It is the journey you continue, but with a heart that now knows what to carry and what to release. It is the ability to distinguish between the true voice and the fearful one, between what you want and what you were taught to want. It is the moment you bravely accept that your past does not define you, it nourishes you. You may not realize it yet, but the strength of the second rebirth lies in the very vulnerability you once felt ashamed of. Those fractures opened a viewpoint that people who have never broken will never understand. You feel more deeply. You listen more fully. You connect more sincerely. And that is why those who enter this phase often become the emotional anchor for others around them, even though they never intended to be strong. Just as important, the second rebirth does not require you to have perfect answers. It only requires honesty. Honesty about what you want, what you fear, and what you no longer accept. When honesty becomes your foundation, a new kind of peace emerges, not peace because everything is calm, but peace because you are no longer fighting yourself. And when you stand at the threshold of that rebirth, you are allowed to ask, "Where do I go from here?" But do not rush too far ahead. The second rebirth does not arrive to push you toward a shiny new goal. It comes to remind you that you have never had a clearer chance to live truthfully than you do now. When people emerge from years of fragmentation, they no longer want to live to impress. They want to live to feel present. And that presence, awake, deep, meaningful, is the greatest gift of this phase. The second rebirth is not a privilege reserved for a chosen few. It comes to anyone brave enough to pause, look inward, and accept that the old life has closed so a new one can open. You are not here to become who you once were. You are here to become the person you were always meant to be. And that is the entire meaning of the chance to be reborn a second time. Learning to say no to protect your peace. There will be a stage in life when you realize that what exhausts you is not the big, overwhelming things, but the yes you said when your heart wanted to say no. You nodded out of politeness, out of obligation, out of fear of disappointing others, and then you were the one who paid the price with long-lasting fatigue. The interesting thing is, the more you mature, the more you understand a simple truth. Peace does not come from pleasing everyone, but from living within your own limits. Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." And sometimes, that act of complete self-acceptance begins with a single, "No." I want to invite you to look back at the times you were so tired you didn't have the strength to say another word, only to realize that in those very moments, something quiet inside you began to rise. I don't want to live like this anymore. When middle-aged American listeners reach this part, they often nod immediately. They exact, because they understand the feeling of someone who spent half a lifetime serving the needs of others, only to return to themselves and no longer know who they are. In Jungian psychology, boundaries are not fences built to shut out the world. Boundaries are an honest recognition of your own energy, and of how you want to invest that energy. When you say no, you are not rejecting someone else, you are choosing to protect the most beautiful part of your soul. And in that moment, you are stepping into a new chapter of spiritual maturity. Many people fear saying no because they think it makes them selfish. But have you ever asked the opposite question? Who is truly being selfish, the one trying to preserve their own energy, or the one who expects you to meet their needs no matter how exhausted you are? When you look at it from that angle, you see that your no is not a refusal, but a healthy act of self-respect. In everyday life, setting boundaries does not have to be a dramatic declaration. It can be the smallest actions: turning off your phone after work hours, refusing extra responsibilities you know you cannot handle, or simply saying, "I need time to think." These small things, when practiced consistently, create a safe space, a space where your soul can breathe. What's striking is that when you begin to say no, you will notice two types of reactions: people who respect you more, and people who become irritated. Jung described this with a profoundly insightful perspective. People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls. Those who become uncomfortable with your boundaries are the ones who are avoiding their own self-reflection. Your no inadvertently exposes their dependence, and so they react. But it is also through this that you will discover who truly belongs in your life during your season of rebirth. Someone who respects your boundaries is someone who respects you. Anyone who loves you only when you say yes never loved you fully in the first place. Learning to say no is the first step in reclaiming your peace, but it goes deeper than that. It is a declaration that you are ready to live a deliberate life, where your energy is reserved for things that matter, where you are no longer fighting just to survive, but creating space for your soul to grow. And when you look back, you will realize this: every no you say today is actually a yes to the person you are becoming, finding meaning again after loss. Sometimes what confuses you most is not the pain that has happened, but the emptiness that seeps in afterward, as if the world around you continues to function normally while your soul does not. You look at life through your own eyes but no longer recognize what you are living for. That change does not arrive loudly. It moves quietly, like a sigh you yourself don't even notice. And then, in a very private moment, you suddenly realize that what once held you up is no longer strong enough to keep you there. Jung once wrote, "The sole purpose of human existence is to kindle a light in the darkness of mere being." And it is hard not to reflect on that sentence whenever you step out of one of life's storms. If you are in that stage, I want you to know that this emptiness is not a sign of failure. It is a reminder that your soul is demanding a new layer of meaning, a meaning no longer defined by social expectations or by the roles you once carried, but by the authenticity of who you truly are. Middle-aged Americans often call this phase the second awakening, because it is the moment they begin to look back over their entire lives and see clearly what is truly worth keeping, what must be let go, and what needs to be rebuilt. What's worth noting is this: loss is often the strongest catalyst for such transformation. When a relationship falls apart, when a job ends, when a loved one passes away, you are forced to confront a question you've avoided for so long. If everything old is gone, then what is left? And when faced with that question, people tend to turn inward, searching for the fragments of meaning they once abandoned. Jung called this the inward turning of the libido, when the vital energy no longer flows outward into the world, but turns back in to illuminate the self. Finding meaning after loss is not about choosing a new goal to fill the void. It is the quiet process of discovering what might make your heart stir again. It may be an old passion you once loved, then abandoned. It may be a value you once believed in, but was distorted by life's chaos. It may be a dream you once thought it was too late to pursue. And sometimes, meaning does not appear as a big purpose at all, but as a very subtle call to live honestly, to live deeply, to live in a way that makes you feel you belong to your own life again. One of the most beautiful paradoxes of loss is this: it takes away what you used to cling to, so that you can see what you truly need. When there is nothing left to prove, people become freer. When there is no one left to please, you begin to please yourself. And when you have faced the worst that life can bring, you become brave enough to choose what is best for you, not what is easiest, not what is most familiar, but what is right. This leads us to an important Jungian perspective. A person only finds meaning when they stop living as the old ego and begin living as the self. The self does not care what you have lost. It cares only about who you are becoming because of those losses. The self is not threatened by emptiness. It sees emptiness as fertile soil for a new life to grow. And in the moment you sit before your brokenness and say, "I want my life to be meaningful again," you have stepped into a journey that very few people are brave enough to take. I want to tell you this sincerely. Meaning does not arrive like lightning. It comes like a sunrise, very slowly, very gently, but once it appears, it makes everything clear. You will begin to see who brings you peace and who drains you, what gives you vitality and what depletes it, what deserves to enter your new chapter and what should stay in the old one. And then, one day, you will realize that meaning is not something you find out there. It lies in the way you look at life after everything you have lost. Loss does not only take it illuminates. It does not only weaken you, it makes you truer. And that truth becomes the foundation of a new meaning. In the end, what I want you to carry with you is this: you are not starting from zero. You are starting from experience, from depth, from lessons that only those who have lost something can understand. And perhaps that is why the meaning you are about to discover will not resemble any meaning you have ever known before. It is not loud. It is not grand. It is simply what helps you wake up in the morning and feel, "My life still has so much worth living for." Note: would you like me to write the full concluding synthesis for the entire series, the 5 signs plus the 3 expanded values? As you have walked through these 5 signs with me, perhaps you have begun to feel something important. The spiritual strength of a woman is not something displayed on the surface. It matures in the dark, in the moments she faces herself, in the hours no one witnesses yet which shape her entire being. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes." And if some part of you resonated as you listened to these reflections, that is not a coincidence. It is because you are awakening. If you recognize yourself in one or more of these signs, see it as a reminder that your journey is moving in the right direction, even if at times it is so quiet that no one else can see it. I want to invite you to consider one more thing. Among these 5 signs, which one made you feel the most seen? Share your thoughts in the comments so we can continue this deeper conversation together. And if you want to keep walking alongside me on this journey of exploring Jungian psychology, don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video so that more people can touch the inner strength within themselves.